Good evening, everyone, or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And thank you to our wonderful panel. We're thrilled to have Kalliopi Lemos, of course, Clare Lilley, Hettie Judah, discussing art beyond the gallery in the context of Kalliopi Lemos's current display of her Bag of Aspirations at Yorkshire Sculpture Park. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the talk, so you can use the chat to post your questions and comments, and we please ask you to keep the questions in the comments towards the end, so post it at the end or towards the end of the talk. I'm Mila Askarova, founding director of Gazeli Art House. I've met Kalliopi in 2014 during her IMI Between Worlds and Between Shadows exhibition at Istanbul Biennale. It's been obviously an absolute pleasure working with her ever since, having showed her work in our spaces in both London and Baku, and also now online. In fact, there's a show online happening, a group show called Icy Faces. We'll be posting a link to it on the chat here, which of the works of Kalliopi is in there. As part of our 10th year anniversary program this year, we'll be showing also Kalliopi's work later in the year. So please do keep an eye out on our announcements, and we look forward to welcoming you all at the space in April. So Kalliopi Lemos is a London-based Greek-born sculptor, painter, and installation artist. Her distinctive big-scale public installations, films, collages, and paintings focus on human rights, issue of undocumented migration, and female oppression. Her Tools of Endearment series have been displayed across London, Soho Square, New Bond Street, with the most recent display at Regent's Park as part of Frieze Sculpture Park, thanks to Claire, and of course now Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Clare Lilley is a British art curator who's curated Yorkshire Sculpture Park's internationally renowned exhibitions of modern and contemporary sculpture since the 1990s as director of program. She's curated Frieze Sculpture Park since 2012, introducing historic work to the contemporary collections. And finally, our moderator, Hettie Judah, is the senior art critic for The Eye and regularly contributes to Frieze, Guardian, Vogue, New York Times, Art Quarterly, and other art publications. And recent essays have appeared in the catalog of 58th Venice Biennale and Vitamin T, a book on textile art published by Phaidon. Hettie also recently published books Art London and Frida Kahlo, which are both must-reads, of course. So thank you all once again. Sit back and enjoy, and over to you, Hettie.
Thank you so much, Mira, and thank you so much. It's a real pleasure actually to be able to see Claire and to be able to see Kalliopi, because I just to actually be able to chat with lovely people about art at the moment seems like such a privilege actually, and such a treat. It's and Claire, I'm so missing being able to come to Yorkshire Sculpture Park and see your incredible exhibitions and the incredible installations in the outdoors. And I remember coming up to visit after the first lockdown and just seeing people thronging back to Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and it just being such a visible illustration of how much people have been longing for art and how important it was for them just to kind of see these literally kind of tailbacks of cars waiting to get into the park, and lots and lots of families just all kind of so happy to be there. It was a wonderful thing to see. And I later in this conversation, I look forward to having a bit of a chat actually about the role that public sculptures had in this extraordinary, very tragic year. Kalliopi, it's just such a treat to have a chance to chat with you. And in some depth, obviously we don't have time for great depth about your work today. You obviously, as we've seen, we've just watched a short film of yours which uses a work of sculpture as the kind of the center for dramatic action, and you work across many different media. You trained in painting actually, I believe, but in the last 15 years really sculpture has become more dominant in your practice, more important in your practice, and you've worked particularly significantly in the public sphere with sculpture. And we're here really to talk particularly about your sculptural works in the public realm and the kind of these big themes that we were just hearing about, equality and human rights, and specifically migration, both historically and the current ongoing crisis in the Mediterranean, and also the works of yours that deal with feminism particularly. So I'd like to really start by talking about the series Tools of Endearment and the Platt and Bag of Aspirations. And I'd like to know a little bit about how this series started, because you've historically done quite a lot of work dealing with kind of physicality and women's issues from different perspectives, but this body of work seems to me quite different. Can you tell us a little bit about how this series started?
Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks, Hettie and Claire. What I would like to say is that there is a continuity in all my the things that interest me, and this particular group of sculptures, the tools of endearment, have emerged after I have done the IMI work in Istanbul in 2013, and the film At the Center of the World, which was just shown at the beginning of this session. And then I continued with working in these huge sculptures to discuss the way women react to how society treats them. So I'm trying to find new ways to engage the public with a discussion. And in this particular project, I thought that if I come out into the public with these big works that refer to objects that women put on directly onto the body or carry, or they embellish themselves with, which are more or less thought as private objects, that would create a way to start a conversation, and then I can talk about how women are treated and what is the reaction that they do. So I started by doing the stiletto heel, which is a big high heel shoe, but instead of a heel, it has a knife at the end. And really, what I wanted to say is what the sentence in front of us says, that beautification is also must be understood as a mechanism of defense for women. So they are trying to be beautiful. They are expected to be beautiful, but they are expected to be good at their work. They're expected to be good as mothers, and they have to be intelligent. They have to be all sorts of things. These are all the expectations of society, and women are trying to fulfill all these things. But at the same time, they feel vulnerable because women have been treated badly for many years. So here we are. This latest works that are in public at this moment is the huge bra that is in Golden Square, and the corset. The bra is something that you wear directly onto your body. And here we have a huge steel sculpture that belongs more to warfare rather than it is like a huge shield that signifies the need for protection for women. And next door to it is a corset, and the corset restricts the person who wears it. So again, I'm talking about the effort to beautify yourself while you're suffering. Um, and I'll go to the Bag of Aspirations, if you like, a beautiful object, something that is fashionable, expensive, and desirable object. And women love having something similar to boost their appearance and and their ego, let's say. So there comes the Bag of Aspirations. But I'll tell you a private story regarding the Bag of Aspirations, if I may, that when I was little, my parents in their home had a storage room which was equipped with a huge metal container with a big flap that was as heavy as the house itself. And what they used it for was that in there, they would put the rugs and the textiles in the house during the summer months when we didn't need them. And this flap would come down and huge padlocks were closing the things inside. This thing was opened up in the winter when the rugs would come out, and embellish the house, create the nice and warm atmosphere. But what went into that box was into that container was all our toys, because schools would start and the padlocks will firmly inhibit us from getting close to our toys. So when I was making the Bag of Aspirations, this big padlock in front of it signifies the impenetrability of anybody into the content of the bag. The bag is full of secrets. Is for women to carry it. It carries their desires, their dreams, their frustrations, their mechanisms of beautification, but it's completely impenetrable to men. So I try to make it as close to the real thing as possible, paying attention to the every little string of the stitching and the texture of the ostrich, making so many experiments, using even like the drills that the dentist would use, to make holes and things to try and replicate the ostrich texture, and use rust and acids to bring it to that lovely color and soft looking thing that is the skin of the ostrich. But yet, when you go near and touch it, you will feel the coldness of the metal. And there again, you have a contradiction. A woman is looking shining, beautiful, warm, and then people forget that a woman can be strong, can be a warrior. So that's what the bag is talking about.
Could I say something? Can I jump in here? Is that
course.
okay?
Go for it, Claire.
I think one of the things that's so beautiful about these works and why they're so successful is the sense of intimacy that they portray. Even though they are monumental, they're made of this material, which is very kind of a relentless material. It's a material that you associate with industry, with engineering. I think in some ways the strap work of the corset and the bra, and of course the ball that we saw just now in the center of the world, there's almost some kind of connotation of a medieval torture, this laying on of flattened bars of steel. But even with the bra, it's not just a bar, it's not a bra which is like armor, it's a bra that has a sense of the woman's body within it. You see this sort of flexibility of the bra straps.
Yeah, it kind of slumps, doesn't it?
Slumps.
But I'm so interested when Kalliopi was talking about this kind of object from her family home and the association of these kind of great big metal boxes, because this duality that's kind of key to these objects, the idea that they're both kind of armor for a woman, but they're also something that's constricting, and they're also in a way almost like a kind of torture device. And I felt like there was something that had inspired them, and I was wondering whether there was a book, or I know poetry is really important to you, or a particular event that had inspired this body of work, or something that you were drawing on, because it's quite a strong kind of it's quite a strong duality that you're working with.
There isn't a particular poem that I would associate with this body of work, but I guess that there is poetry in each one of us, and sometimes poetry doesn't come only in lines, comes into the work, and sculpture. And yes, Claire, when you mentioned the engineering, it's very important to me. Before deciding to become an artist, I wanted to become a naval architect. That was to entice my dad, who wouldn't allow me to do things. And because he was in shipping, I thought that if I say to him naval architect, and I was thinking design and this kind of things, and I would follow him when he was inspecting ships and things around. But of course, because I was a woman, I wasn't allowed to do naval architecture. And when I I came to want to become an artist, he thought that this was even worse than becoming a naval architect. So I had to wait a few years until I was married and a mother, and then, you know, wasn't anymore under his own jurisdiction, so that I was allowed to go to the art school and fulfill my desire to actually endorse myself as an artist. So the interest in engineering and in dealing with metals and things, maybe it comes from me visiting ships and boats from a very young age. So I don't know. Who
But also
knows?
this experience of being constricted as a woman as well, of having something that was squeezing you and stopping you from doing what you wanted to do as well, because
Yes,
it didn't
indeed.
appear to be the right thing.
Yes, I couldn't find the right thing to do.
Claire,
Right.
we've seen these works installed in the public realm. So we've got the bra and the corset that are in central London, and you installed this extraordinary work, Platt, as part of the Frieze Sculpture Park or sculpture display last year. And you now have Bag of Aspirations at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, but it was in Mayfair as part of the Mayfair Art Weekend beforehand. What does the context do to these works? Does it change them? Do you have to be very careful about the context that you display works like this? Do you think it changes the reading of them to have this bag outside Phoenix, for example?
I think it's in a sense the message is possibly more obvious outside Phoenix because you're making this direct relationship with consumerism and with luxury, with a luxury brand. But honestly, the works themselves are so strong that they speak for themselves. They hold themselves in whatever context that you place them into. And I think that one of the things about, you can't really see it here with Bag of Aspirations, that hedge behind it, which is a 130-year-old hedge, is very, very high. So Kalliopi, you'll remind me of how high Bag of Aspirations is.
It's almost 3 meters.
It's almost 3 meters. So it's much bigger than a person. And the monumental aspect of it in any context is really very, very powerful. I actually placed this piece almost at the head of a set of 18th century steps, and the terrace that you see it on is an 18th century terrace with a balustrade. And so, you know, people are surprised by it. Children run up to it and you immediately know what it is. And then there's this journey of discovery of trying to understand what it is that you're looking at. Because, you know, this is in a way a replica of the Jane Birkin bag made from ostrich leather. And the detailing of it is absolutely extraordinary. And I think you can see with respect, Kalliopi, a progression in your ability to handle this material, this very obdurate material in steel. To create something like this is really very, very exceptional. I don't know how long the bag took to make, but I imagine a long time. And I know that within this bag, there's a really powerful skeleton holding it together and holding it in the form that it is.
Yeah, well, I would like to talk about the process of making them in a minute, but just before we move on to that, I do want to talk a little bit more about this kind of theme or the themes that are kind of bind this body of work together, because to me there's quite a kind of critical aspect to it, that, you know, putting this bag outside Phoenix isn't just saying, oh, here's a lovely bag that you can have. You know, there's this tension of you know, the way that women feel that they need to spend thousands and thousands of pounds on a very expensive accessory so they feel they fit into the idea of how they should look perfectly in society. And also just even actually
they're ambiguous. All of these works are ambiguous in their context. And, you know, similarly, when I first saw the Tours of Endearment in Golden Square, you know, they make a huge impression. And they are not there. There's nothing simple about them at all. And the fact that women put themselves into corsets or are put into corsets isn't simple.
Yeah. But I thought there was also quite an interesting, I mean, just from another perspective, there was quite an interesting tension having that as one of the emblematic works this year of the Mayfair Art Weekend, because part of the reason the Mayfair Art Weekend was started was because there was this literally a tension in the area between the luxury goods houses and the art galleries, and the art galleries were kind of being squeezed out by the luxury goods houses. And this bag is, of course, like the iconic commodification of Bohemia as well. It's, you know, the bag that was made for this kind of barefooted, tousle-haired kind of woman. And I think the most expensive one that sold so far was something like £250,000. So it's this kind of odd way that luxury manages to kind of consume, Bohemia manages to kind of consume the art world as well, and turn it into product. I mean, there's that aspect to it. It seems to me as well. Maybe I'm just imposing.
No, I think that's true, and actually there's another layering which is a little bit more hidden unless you research the Birkin bag, which is that Jane Birkin was sat next to the chief exec of Hermes, and said, you know, she couldn't find a bag for, as a young mother, she couldn't find a bag that kind of worked for her. And he sat and sketched this bag that she could put a milk bottle into for her baby. So, you know, there's just an absolutely other brilliant layering. And I know, curiously, when I had my first baby, I had a Kate Spade bag that was kind of boxy like this. And that was the bag I used that made me feel kind of still like a woman and feminine, but it was practical and kind of fit, you know, worked as for me as being a young mother at the same time. So anyway, for me, that's a kind of very nice and strange confluence.
Kalliopi, is there a reason you chose this particular model of bag?
I admire it myself. I feel that it has enough room, like what Claire said, but I didn't try to put a bottle in one of them. A baby bottle, but it's very practical, and I admire the workmanship. Among all the fashion things that I have touched and carried and pulled around, I do admire, as an artist, I admire how these things are made beyond the fashion. So when I was thinking to make a handbag, and I went through a lot of ideas, I ended up in this one. So it's not that I didn't kind of made a debate with myself and a research about which one to replicate, and then I asked the House of Hermes for permission to do it. So you know, I couldn't just make a complete copy like that without the permission from the house.
Interesting. I'd like to go a bit more into this naval architect side of you, because you've been very kind and shared some of your drawings and some behind the scenes images of these works of Bag of Aspirations and the plait being made. And I'd like to hear a bit more about the materials that you work with and the techniques that you had to develop for these two works particularly, because they're obviously very, very different. But I mean, the plait, which we've not looked at so much, is it's an extraordinary work, and I'm sure it was extremely complicated to manipulate and to create the effect that you did of these individual strands of glistening hair.
Right. Well, here in front of us, we see some sketches as I was trying to draw the ostrich skin and to really make where the feathers come from, and then we did the welds and then ground the welds again, and then did the drills, you know, the lines, sketched the lines, how to make these wrinkles of the ostrich skin, and worked on pieces of metal again and again to try and replicate these. So we had to use various tools to do it, and I was happy in the end because everybody thought it was leather when it left the studio. And of course the next idea was the plait, the big plait. which again, I had the desire to make it look as if it was gathered hair and plaited, actually, which was an extremely difficult thing to achieve. And in the end, what we did is that, first of all, I made the replica of a plait in plasticine, which was about, let's say, 70, 80 centimeters long, which was the complete look of the plait. And then we replicated that model in polystyrene at 6.5 meters tall, so that we could see it in full size. And after that, we tried to decide which is the size of the rods that I wanted to use in order to create the effect of the hair. And if I used big rods, it wouldn't look like hair. So I did the smallest rod that I could use that wouldn't warp with the welding, because if you put fire to it, it would change the shape. And then, of course, we discovered that I couldn't weld the plait from the outside because I didn't want the weld. So it had to be welded from the inside. So we made the segments of the big plait, the segments, each segment created casings, and then laid the rods next to each other and welded them from the back so that you can't see any welds outside. It's like as if by magic they are welded together. Well, it took us a year and a half, over a year and a half. And with these things, you need to have faith that you're doing the right thing, because of their size, I couldn't have seen this thing outside the studio, and I couldn't stand it up right inside the studio. So it needed, I was so stunned when I saw it in freeze, because I was so happy to really be able to see that sculpture that I was working for a year and a half on, standing upright. It was really so thrilling.
And daylight as well must have changed it completely.
Absolutely, Claire. The texture of it was enhanced even more in daylight, because it really it had the sheen of a chestnut, a kind of brown plait, like my own plait that I used to have when I was young. So yeah, so it's I was happy with it in the end.
Can we see a picture of it in freeze?
I think we've got some kind of later on. We'll be able to see, because I think we're going to celebrate it as the kind of final hurrah of the conversation. But
it's really, it's very, unless people have seen it, it's really difficult to understand the ingenuity that's gone into the making of this work. It's really something.
Yeah, but it was amazing seeing the way that it was being created from the inside as well. Claire, I wanted actually to talk with you a little bit about monumental sculpture and materials, because, and it's terrible that this should still be the case, but it still seems that, there's this association between big works of kind of metal sculpture and this idea of it being quite blokey, that it's a kind of, that it's a kind of macho area, and you kind of think of, Caro or Richard Serra. And of course at Yorkshire Sculpture Park you have, extraordinary, very important works by people like Barbara Hepworth and Elizabeth Frink. But is there any kind of foundation to this cliche? Do you find that, is there a foundation to this idea that kind of great big metals works of sculpture is a kind of man's area, or is that just kind of tiresome and wrong?
No, it's true. And, men have had the means of production. So hardly surprising, in order to make sculpture, particularly sculpture that can live outside, where it's obviously battling with the elements, or it has to be able to deal with the elements, it requires a huge amount of collaboration and support in engineering and in the creation of work. And many artists, Miro didn't start making sculpture until he was well into his 50s. By then he was a very famous painter. But it wasn't until he left Barcelona, he went to Mallorca, he had land, he had collaborators, he had a wife who was looking after him. You know, he had a studio that could actually help support this really very, very demanding area of practice. And to create works, well, like Kalliopi's and like Joana Vasconcelos, which we're looking at right now, you know, these are really materially and spatially assertive objects, and they require, interestingly, Kalliopi has mentioned faith, and faith is super important in terms of what risks an artist is it allows himself to take, because it's expensive working in this way. In the risks that a gallery can take in terms of supporting an artist. And clearly, at the end of the day, you have to be able to kind of realize a financial return on these works. So that's investment in an entire career. And, you know, most of the art world is owned by men, certainly has been until the point that we're able to have this discussion. Most art is made by men, bought by men, sold by men. And so it's a kind of a self-perpetuating market. I think at the moment, of the 100 most expensive artists on the auction markets, on the secondary market, only 2% are female. And that, I don't think any of those are living. So, you know, life is certainly changing, and women are definitely taking more risk, but that's in a way because they're enabled to take risks. So this piece by Joana is a work that when it leaves Yorkshire Sculpture Park will go to a female collector in Spain who commissioned it. And so
and this we can actually see, I think, did you say we can see Kalliopi's Bag of Aspirations from standing next to the solitaire as well?
For those people who don't know the sculpture park, it's a 500-acre 18th century estate, and it occupies a valley. So Kalliopi's is on a formal terrace, and this piece by Joana is sort of above, so you can actually kind of look up to it. It's at one of the highest points in the park. But I think, you know, one of the reasons that I wanted to put Bag of Aspirations where it is that there's a kind of a journey that leads to it, and the journey involves Elizabeth Frink, Nikki de Saint-Phal, Barbara Hepworth's Family of Man, the most important.
So extraordinary that it's always such a thrill seeing it there.
Anya Galaccio, Joana Vasconcelos, Leiko Ikamura. So, you know, you're seeing a very deliberate amplification of women's voice in this part of Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and Kalliopi is a really important part of that amplification.
And it's just so wonderful seeing, you know, your programming in the way that you're also bringing women into the sphere of monumental sculpture very visibly. And I think you have a touring show actually of women sculptors coming later this year.
Yeah, Breaking the Mold. That's an arts collection, works from the Arts Council collection. And interestingly, it really does show that journey of how it's not that women haven't wanted to or haven't, but you do have to have the means of production to create large work. And that's significant. I mean, I had a conversation with Tracy Emin a couple of years ago when I showed one of her very large bronzes at Frieze. And she said, you know, making this sculpture is really hard. So, I know. And she's creating a new studio in Margate in order to be able to do that. But it's a massive investment. And that you have to be at a point in your career when you can actually kind of do that. You actually have the means to create.
I want to shift a little bit now and just talk briefly with Kalliopi about the work that you've done exploring the theme of migration, because it's not just the recent migrant crisis, it's migration as a historic phenomenon from what I'm aware. And when we were talking before, you described the work Rites of Passage as a kind of crossing point for you. And I wonder if you can explain what you mean by that and why it became this kind of crossing moment in this kind of transitional moment in your work. And there's also the work Crossings, which you were working on at this time as well, which I'd like to touch on a bit.
Thank you, Hettie. Rites of Passage was my first sculpture exhibition. It was because I trained as a painter, and I used to think of myself as a painter until I started the three-dimensional work. And this 2006 exhibition in a Cycladic island in Syros was my first attempt to 3 dimensions. And it was quite exciting, but it was also a rite of passage for me. Because I entered a new domain, I felt I entered a new domain, which was so exciting. I was tackling different materials. I'm naturally a very impatient and fast working person, and sculpture demanded me to slow down because this kind of works demand you to be beyond the faith, Claire, that you mentioned, a lot of physical effort, taming materials, asking permissions from the materials themselves to help you, to help you in their collaboration, with you, and try to, for instance, I have the first sculpture here in front is bundled reeds surrounded by plaster and clay, and the one beyond is again bundled steel rods. Here, the crossings, again, I'm talking about crossing rites of passage, crossing barriers, and here I have the migration issue, which as a Greek person I have experienced while visiting my homeland. All these boats arriving in Greece full of migrants. And here we have Brandenburg Gate and a heap of misery of 9 boats that I brought from the Greek islands to set up in front of Brandenburg Gate. And again, talking about the context, here Brandenburg Gate represents Europe, the center of Europe. And here is where the migrants want to come. And the boats are placed in front of this so imposing gates, but you can see that they're placed sideways as if they're asking permission to enter Europe. And deliberately, I left this huge sculpture without any light on it, while Brandenburg Gate was absolutely luxuriously lit, and it is made of marble. And here we have these rickety boats kind of held from this wooden skeleton facing downwards, like as if they're crying, or if they're without light. And they were in darkness. So you had the contrast of the light in Europe, the civilization and all that, and opposite it, a heap of sadness standing exactly next to it. This was in 2009, and it was the last part of the trilogy, Crossings, which started in Eleusis, which was my first work. Regarding migration, first ever work, because I encountered these boats and started collecting them in the Greek islands. And I thought that standing up like this, it's like a human being standing upright and bearing their chest and their pain to you. So Eleusis was the first stop. The second stop was Istanbul, where I chose Turkey. I took these boats from Greece and took them back to Turkey, and because this is where the boats were coming from, and it was as if I was asking Turkey to shake hands with us to try and tackle this problem of the migrants. And then the third piece of the triangle was in front of Brandenburg Gate, bringing the boats there. So I have got 7 boats in Eleusis and 2 in Istanbul. This is an installation that is still standing there since 2007. And the last piece was in Berlin. It was to celebrate the fall of the wall, the 20 years of the fall of the wall then. This particular installation that you see in front of you stayed in Eleusis for 3 years while I was trying to set up the other 2 installations in Istanbul and in Berlin to create this triangular shape and to discuss firstly the declaration of pain here, secondly the collaboration with Istanbul, and thirdly, finding a solution in Berlin. We still haven't found a solution, really. So after the 3 years, this boat started looking extremely rugged and were even more sad than you can see them here. And I decided that I couldn't dismantle it. I felt so I felt so sad to dismantle it. So I created a ritual like a funeral to send them off, to burn them off. So I invited 7 women, including myself, and we recited the Persephone from Yannis Ritsos. Persephone is the daughter of Demeter, who goes to the underworld for 6 months a year and lives the life and goes underneath. And then some pieces from T.S. Eliot's The Four Quartets. And after we recited the poems, each one of us lit one of the boats. So finally, this installation went off into flames, and we said goodbye to the sailors and to the people that were lost in this transition. So my aim with this kind of installations is to try and create a link, a bridge between us and the people that dare get into that boat and cross the sea to find a new life. And just by looking at the boats, you realize that this is not a trip of pleasure or anything else. It's just something that you do in desperation. Is a jump, like the towers in New York when people were jumping out because fire was behind them. So this is my experience of talking to the people and collecting the boats and trying to convey to people that this attempts of leaving your roots behind, your language, your country, is not a pleasure trip. So that's what my work is about in Crossings.
I think it's such a powerful, extraordinary gesture to turn or to use a work of sculpture as a ritual object in this way as well, so that it becomes this kind of this moment of transition and something that can kind of, you know, like a vessel for a lot of grief and emotion, and can be used also as a work of commemoration and consume itself in that way as well. It's that Kalliopi actually has quite about an hour-long video of the final ritual of burning Crossings and the speakings on her website, and I do recommend that people watch it. It's very, very moving. We're coming, unfortunately, to the end of our time. I've got about 1,000 more questions, but I'm going to have to behave well and edit myself. If anybody does have a question for Kalliopi, I think we can probably start to open the chat. And I'd like just to wind up our formal conversation by returning to the Platte, which we saw the construction of a little earlier in the conversation, because we've recently had the exciting news that the Platte's been bought by the city of Rotterdam, and it's going to be installed there and unveiled on International Women's Day. And I'd like to talk a bit about why it's a significant work to unveil on that particular date. You know, how does the Platte symbol kind of function symbolically, and why is it so important in Rotterdam to have this work as well?
Well, first of all, Rotterdam, indeed, it is again a city that my dad frequented when I was young, and because he was a seaman, so sea captain, he was there often, and suddenly my work and his career get plotted together in this instance. So a plot, a soft, floppy, shiny, luxurious kind of texture thing. Here we see it standing upright, taking a stance of disobedience against the world, like a standard bearer, talking about things that need to be changed. Women have had their hair cut to tame and shame, and you know, also sometimes we cut the hair to offer like an offering in a funeral, like a sacrifice of something. So this hair is an important feature of our body, and to suddenly see it plaited and standing up there, it points to women needing to take a stance, really stand up for themselves and for the things that they believe and they need. So Rotterdam have a huge sculpture collection and very prominent artists there, but they're all men. And suddenly they chose this work that is made by a woman because they felt that it's about time to really address what women want to say. And I've been asked if I feel that it is important for women to tell their opinion, and I said, well, half the population of the, you know, I mean, you know, of course it is important. So they want to unveil it on the 8th of March. Unfortunately, I cannot be there myself for the unveiling, but they have prepared electronically, you know, videos and other things so that they can do the unveiling on the 8th of March, which is Women's Day, for the first woman sculpture that they acquire. And this
Yeah,
is
I think we should maybe put Claire on to curating public sculpture in Rotterdam. I think she'd probably shake things up a bit on the gender balance. Well, we've been having lots of lovely comments actually and questions coming through on the chat. So the first one we have is from Steve Allen and actually leads on very appropriately from what we've been talking about, gender and sculpture. So Steve says, in discussion with other artists and on my online workshops, we discussed the division between craft and art. And it was raised that craft is often used instead of art. And I guess he means craft as a word as opposed to art, as a means to diminish the creative pursuits of women. This in and of itself is a chauvinist act. Given the high fashion aesthetic of the work at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, do you find fashion and its consumption is also diminished in this way? And I presume he means as in fashion's just put down by people as being a woman's interest. I'd be interested to hear both Claire and Kalliopi's thoughts on that, actually.
Oh, I didn't quite get the question.
I guess Steve was talking about the way that the word craft is used to put down women's creative endeavors, so that often women's artwork has been diminished as being craft and it's been seen as being less than, so it doesn't fit into the art museum with the great works of men. And he was suggesting that maybe fashion also fits into that category, that it's seen as being a kind of culturally lesser than.
Maybe. I mean, I think, you know, often it's to do with material. So, you know, there has been a sort of sense of works made in clay or works made in fabric or embroidery, that these works have sort of been denigrated in the way that Steve is suggesting. I think it has taken male possession of those materials to pull craft into a different sphere. And so it would be pretty unusual now to go to an art gallery or museum and not see work by men, whether it's, you know, Grayson Perry or Sterling Ruby or whoever, that haven't taken those materials and started to use them to create their work. And that's really sort of shifted the ground. I don't think it should have been that way, but that's my observation.
And you've got Matty Boffin doing a fashion installation artworks extravaganza at Yorkshire Sculpture Park later in the year, I think, don't you?
Yes, yeah, and ultimately that work, as I would suggest here with the plat, is very much about identity. It's about who we are, placing yourself, understanding who you are in the world. And so I think, material is really important, medium is really important. And, by embracing steel in this case, in the way that Kalliopi has done, she's been able to create something which is going to be there for many hundreds, if not thousands of years, but also is using, in a way, a language which people understand to be a serious language, which, we can, in terms of steel, we can certainly trace back to David Smith and to Anthony Caro.
We've got lots and lots of questions coming through, so I think we're going to have to do quick fire rounds on this. Kalliopi, we have a question from Emma Sheridan, which is a big question, but I guess we'll see if we can answer it as concisely as possible. How did you start doing public sculpture?
Well, how did I? I thought that the questions that the discussions that I wanted to raise needed for my work to be out there. So, and make people aware. My first public work was to do with migration. So when I discovered those boats, I wanted to bring them to the attention of the public. So this was how I started. The work for migration was the one to start me that way. And then I thought the Tools of Endearment is another series for the public. Was and there were the intimate objects enlarged enough to create the shock. That was another intent to go into public space and bring the discussion to the public. Is that an answer enough?
We have a kind of philosophical question from Philippa Plock. Who's interested in the symbolism of bags and handbags. She says, I'm intrigued by the contradiction between the intimate meanings in bag. And I'm reminded of Hedda Gabler, where the handbag represents the womb and all the Freudian meanings attached to it, such as hysteria. And the masculine way of working women, having to adopt to create. And the masculine way of working women have to adopt to create monumental sculptures. I guess she's saying you're having to work in a masculine way to create a monumental work of sculpture out of metal, and yet the handbag has the association perhaps with the womb and various kind of feminine associations. How do you resolve these contradictions in relation to engaging everyday women who aren't culturally empowered to speak in these masculine ways, but might be moved by your sculpture in relation to life events such as miscarriage, pregnancy, and birth? How do you empower women viewers to engage in this aesthetic dialogue? So that's quite a big philosophical question. I don't, but maybe you don't need to actually feel that you need to. Well, go for it, Kalliopi.
What I would like to say is, first of all, each work is about one matter. You cannot expect to resolve so many questions with each sculpture, with one sculpture. Therefore, I'm doing several different sculptures in order to address different viewpoints, even regarding the attitude that women are treated by society and so on. So the handbag and the womb don't have to be small in order to address the problem of it being symbolizing the womb, or so, it can be a huge womb, and there you have it. So I think the womb is also not just a feminine a feminine matter. It is also a masculine thing, because men are born from a womb. So so I don't think that philosophical matters to do with women are need to be addressed just by women, and so they're there, and I'm doing my best creating big sculptures.
And also, I would say just because steel has been owned by men doesn't mean that it is masculine.
Exactly.
Very good point, Claire. Well, you're having lots of very lovely comments from people that have actually seen the work installed at Yorkshire Sculpture Park and have really enjoyed hearing about the way that it's being constructed. I think we've probably just about got time for one more. Yeah, you're getting a lot of love for the bag. It's very touching. I hope they'll be able to print out the comments for you. I think we've got time for one more question. I'm just kind of scrolling through for so we've got some technical ones. We've got one from George Lemos. I don't know if George Lemos is a relative of, or it's just a coincidental surname. The story of Samson and Delilah. In the story of Samson and Delilah, hair symbolizes the strength of Samson. Therefore, is Kalliopi's plait, does it symbolize the ignored strength of women?
Yes, I was thinking of Samson and Delilah actually when I was doing the plait, and how Samson lost his strength when Delilah cut off his hair. And when I did the plait, I know that a lot of men have plaits, and it doesn't address men only, actually. Although it is, I am a woman and I'm talking from the feminine point of view. But yes, I would like to say to George that hair and the way that it is dressed and the way that it is worn are similar for women and for men.
I think on that note, we shall have to say thank you very much to both of you. And thank you very much to Gazeli for hosting us. And Claire, thank you so much for your fascinating contribution and for giving us the art historical perspective on this and women in sculpture. And Kalliopi, first of all, thank you for your work, which has just enriched this year when it's been so important for us to be able to encounter art outdoors. And really, honestly, seeing plait in frieze sculpture was just such a kind of wonderful highlight. And I know Claire was talking about watching people having conversations around it and it becoming this kind of gathering point for people and really brought people together. And thank you too for joining us this evening. It's been a real pleasure finding out a bit more about your work. And thank you everyone for joining us and for your lovely comments and suggestions. I hope that, and questions, I hope that Kalliopi can read some of them because you're getting a lot of appreciation.
Thank you so much, Hettie, and thank you, Claire, so much. You really helped me along to be able to talk about these matters, and I really enjoyed it. And you know, I hope we have. Oh my goodness! Look at all these things, all these comments for the work. Well, I'll have to go and see them. My goodness! Wow! Thank you, Claire, so much. Thank you for putting up my plait and my handbag. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. I hate this Zoom thing where it ends very abruptly, but we just need to kind of go goodbye, I think. Thank you all and good evening.